Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into Unit 8, Topic 5, Decolonization after 1900. It's a massive topic, but we're going to break it down so it makes perfect sense. Ready? Let's get into it. First, what exactly is decolonization? Simply put, it's the process by which colonies gained their independence from imperial powers. This wave of independence movements really took off after World War II. Think about it. The major colonial powers like Britain and France were exhausted. They were economically drained, their militaries were stretched thin, and the moral high ground they once claimed was crumbling. The war had been fought in the name of freedom and self-determination, and people in the colonies were listening. They started asking, if this applies to Europe, why doesn't it apply to us? Plus, the rise of the United States and the Soviet Union as global superpowers changed the game. Both were ideologically opposed to the old European-style colonialism, even though they were building their own spheres of influence. The Cold War created a new dynamic where both the US and the USSR would often support independence movements to win allies, putting even more pressure on the old empires. So, how did colonies actually achieve independence? Well, the paths were incredibly diverse. Some were negotiated peacefully, while others were won through long, bloody armed struggles. Let's look at some key examples to see how this played out. We'll start in South Asia with the big one, India. The movement for Indian independence had been building for decades. Led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi and his strategy of nonviolent civil disobedience, the Indian National Congress was the main political force pushing for self. After World War II, Britain was ready to let go, but a huge problem emerged: the deep religious divide between Hindus and Muslims. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, demanded a separate nation for Muslims. This led to the partition of India in 1947, creating the independent nations of India and Pakistan. It was a moment of triumph, but also one of immense tragedy, as the partition sparked widespread violence and created one of the largest mass migrations in human history. Now, let's shift our focus to Africa, where the story of decolonization is just as complex. We see a mix of negotiated transfers of power and violent conflicts. In West Africa, Ghana, formerly known as the Gold Coast, became the first sub-Saharan African colony to gain independence in 1957. This was largely a negotiated process. Led by the charismatic Kwame Nkrumah, he was a powerful advocate for Pan-Africanism, the idea that all people of African descent should unite. Ghana's independence was a huge inspiration for other African nations. But not all transitions were this smooth. Take Algeria, a French settler colony in North Africa. France considered Algeria an integral part of its nation, not just a colony, because of the large European population living there. This made them incredibly reluctant to let go. The Algerian War for Independence, which lasted from 1954 to 1962, was a brutal and violent conflict. The National Liberation Front, or FLN, used guerrilla tactics, while the French army responded with harsh counterinsurgency measures. The war was deeply divisive in France itself, and eventually led to Algeria gaining its independence. Another example of armed struggle is found in Southeast Asia, specifically in Vietnam. After World War II, the Vietnamese nationalist leader Ho Chi Minh declared independence from France. He was a communist, which complicated things immensely. As the Cold War was just heating up, this led to the First Indochina War, where the Vietnamese forces, known as the Viet Minh, fought against the French. After a decisive defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, the French withdrew. However, the Geneva Accords divided Vietnam into a communist north and a non-communist south, setting the stage for the even larger Vietnam War involving the United States. So we've seen negotiation in India and Ghana and armed struggle in Algeria and Vietnam. What about the governments that emerged after independence? This is a crucial part of the story. Many newly independent states initially tried to establish democracies. However, building stable political institutions from scratch was incredibly difficult. Colonial powers hadn't exactly prepared them for self-governance. In fact, they often left behind unresolved ethnic tensions and weak economies. As a result, some new states saw their governments shift. In some places, strongman leaders or military dictatorships took control, arguing that a firm hand was needed to maintain stability and promote economic development. In other cases, a single political party dominated the government for decades. We also see the lingering economic influence of former colonizers, a concept sometimes called neocolonialism. Even though a country was politically independent, its economy might still be heavily dependent on its former colonial ruler or other Western powers. Let's look at a few more specific cases to illustrate these post-independence challenges. In Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power and promoted a vision of Pan-Arabism. He took a bold step by nationalizing the Suez Canal, which had been controlled by British and French interests. This move was a powerful symbol of national sovereignty, but also led to the Suez Crisis of 1956, showing how former colonial powers were willing to intervene to protect their interests. In other parts of the world, movements for autonomy also emerged within existing states. In Canada, the Quebecois nationalist movement sought to protect French language and culture, with some groups even pushing for separation. In Nigeria, ethnic tensions between different groups led to a civil war in the late 1960s when the Igbo people tried to establish their own state of Biafra. These examples show that the drawing of colonial borders often lumped together disparate groups, creating a recipe for internal conflict down the road. So, to recap the big ideas for your AP exam, first, decolonization was sparked by the aftermath of World War II, the rise of nationalist movements, and the new Cold War context. Second, the paths to independence varied dramatically, from peaceful negotiations to violent armed struggles. Be ready to compare examples like India and Ghana with Algeria and Vietnam. Third, newly independent states faced immense challenges, including political instability, ethnic conflicts, and economic dependency. The legacy of colonialism was long and complicated. Understanding these different pathways and outcomes is key. Remember the leaders like Gandhi and Nkrumah and Ho Chi Minh? Remember the different strategies from nonviolent resistance to guerrilla warfare? And remember that independence wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new, often difficult chapter. That's our deep dive into decolonization. I know it's a lot, but hopefully breaking it down this way helps you connect the dots. Keep reviewing these key examples and the broader patterns, and you'll be in great shape for the exam. Thanks so much for watching. If this was helpful, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more AP World History Review. See you in the next video.